You've seen the headlines, right? The ones about Sharia law? They're often pretty alarming, and that's by design. But what's the actual story behind the scary rhetoric? Today, we're going to dig into that gap between the political narrative and the economic reality. Let's get into it.
To really get to the bottom of this, we have to start with the most important question, the one that's going to guide us through this whole explainer. Who actually profits from pushing this narrative of a Sharia threat? You know what they say, follow the incentives and you'll usually find the story.
Okay, first things first. What even is Sharia? Well, the word itself literally just means the path. And it's not some single, scary rulebook. Think of it more like a vast and diverse legal framework that comes from Islamic teachings. It covers pretty much everything, from how you pray all the way to property rights. It's way more nuanced than a headline could ever tell you.
So, how did the path turn into such a political lightning rod? Well, that brings us to our first section here, the demonization playbook. We're going to break down the machine that actually builds this narrative of fear.
Let's kick things off with a pretty stark number. A 2019 study found something, well, kind of shocking. Media stories that mention Sharia are 2.5 times more likely to be framed negatively than neutrally or positively. That doesn't just happen by accident, right? That's a pattern, and it's one that shapes public opinion on a massive scale.
And what this creates is this really vicious feedback loop. The media pumps up the fear, politicians then jump on that wave to get votes, and this just gives extremist groups on all sides more fuel for their fire. It's such a powerful cycle because, it taps right into our most basic instincts about safety and who's in our group.
So, who's actually running this playbook? Well, the research points to 5 key players. We've got the obvious ones, media headlines, political pundits, and extremist groups. But then there are the 2 working more behind the scenes, think tanks and lobby groups that fund reports to frame Sharia negatively. And maybe the most powerful player of all, the social media algorithms.
And you really can't underestimate the algorithm's role here. Get this, a study of YouTube found that videos with titles like Sharia Danger get a whopping 30% more watch time than the neutral educational ones. The algorithm, by its very nature, rewards outrage with visibility. So you can almost think of the algorithm as the silent partner in this whole venture. Look, the code itself doesn't have an opinion, right? It's not trying to be political, but because it rewards whatever is sensational, it ends up pushing the most polarizing voices right to the top and shoves all the nuance down to the bottom.
Okay, so while all that fear is dominating the headlines, there's a completely different story unfolding in the global economy. So now we're going to pivot. We're going to follow the money and look at the massive, very real impact of Sharia principles on markets around the world.
Just take a second to look at that number. $2 trillion. That is the estimated size of the global Islamic finance market. I mean, this isn't some tiny niche thing. This is a massive economic engine, and it's running on principles that come straight from Sharia. This is the story you almost never hear about.
So where is all that money, right? Where is this $2 trillion market actually showing up? Well, let's dive into a few key industries that are being totally transformed by Sharia-compliant practices. First up, banking. Now, you know how conventional banking generally works, right? It's all about lending money and charging interest, which is known as riba. Well, Sharia prohibits that. So Islamic finance completely flips the script. Instead of interest, it's all about contracts based on sharing profits and losses. So a bank might buy an asset and lease it to you or become a direct partner in your business venture. It fundamentally changes the relationship from lender-borrower to partners in a deal.
Next, let's talk insurance. The conventional model can be seen as a kind of a gamble on uncertainty, which Sharia discourages. So the alternative, known as takaful, restructures the whole concept. Policyholders contribute to a shared pool of funds. It works like a system of mutual aid, where the community itself collectively covers any losses, instead of just transferring risk over to some giant for-profit company. And believe me, this is not a small market. The global demand for takaful is projected to hit $80 billion by 2025. I mean, that signals a huge appetite for financial products that actually align with people's ethical values. And you see these principles just ripple out into all these other huge industries. Take food. The principle of halal unlocks access to a market of 1.8 billion consumers. In entertainment, avoiding haram, or forbidden content, has led to whole catalogs of clean media. And in fashion and cosmetics, principles of modesty and using halal ingredients have fueled the growth of entire new product lines. And just to really drive this home, the global market for halal cosmetics alone is also projected to hit $80 billion by 2027.
So, for the big global brands, understanding and adapting to these principles isn't just about respect, it's a massive, massive economic opportunity.
So, we've got these two totally competing stories. On one hand, the political narrative of fear, on the other, the economic narrative of transformation. In our final section, let's look at who's actually working to bridge that gap and offer a more nuanced counter-narrative.
So who's actually out there pushing back against this oversimplification? Well, you've got a few key groups. You've got academics publishing work that highlights the incredible diversity within Islamic legal thought. You've got grassroots community initiatives on the ground working to demystify the civil aspects of Sharia, things like contract and family law. And really importantly, you have court rulings in what the US and Europe that consistently reinforce religious neutrality, refusing to treat Sharia as some kind of monolithic threat.
So at the end of the day, what's the antidote to this whole demonization playbook? It's not just about having more facts. It's about telling better, more nuanced stories. And honestly, it's about all of us being more critical consumers of the media we see every single day.
And that leaves us with one final thought. In a world that seems to run on outrage and clickbait headlines, what if the simple act of seeking and understanding nuance is the most powerful tool we have? Could that be our new superpower? Something to think about. Thanks for diving in.